This afternoon, I'm going to be demonstrating on how I urban sketch. This is especially for those who are starting to urban sketch on location. My name is Janil Arlegui. I'm an architect by profession. I teach architecture, drawing, and painting, and anything to do with how to draw architecture. And then fast forward in 2011, there was the urban sketchers. I found some people, and then we co-founded the Urban Sketchers Manila. Back then, it was Urban Sketchers Philippines. I'd just like to show you the process of how I did this now. This is a typical urban sketching example for me, something that I finished very quickly and very fast. I tried to be as light as possible. Some of the equipment that I use is this. So this is my main watercolor palette set. The typical thing that I use is a fountain pen, which is relatively cheap. This is only 260 pesos. This is the Sailor waterproof type of ink for fountain pens, and a water brush. So this is typically what I use when I'm sketching out, but traditional cheap brushes like this, like a nylon, it's pretty much okay. You don't need all this much of color. All you need is like, again, up to 8 probably. Okay, so that's the sketch gear. So this is the actual picture where I was standing, and then I was sketching this fire station. Over the years, I learned how to do these things faster and faster. So the sketching part is just a matter of minutes. And it's not perfect in terms of line drawing, in terms of having a straight line. The main purpose of this is to get the essence, not to be 100% accurate like this. So if you can see the differences between this and to the finished sketch, there are some mistakes. There are actually a lot of mistakes. I continued on. I wasn't bothered with that because, or else, might as well take a picture and go home and illustrate the entire thing. So after finishing the ink line drawing, it started to rain. So I had to take cover in a cafe. So that's why I was taking pictures first before I colored this. And then this is the initial underwash. This is called underwash. So this is mainly placing in a light tint of colors. But the purpose of an underwash is to tone the paper, not to be 100%. Of course, some parts I kept as white paper. And then eventually you start contrasting, and then this is what you get. The biggest questions that I get all the time from students is that why did I decide the colors that I used? For example, why do I use yellow a lot, and then this certain violet that I keep using? Well, it's mainly yellow and violet are opposites or complementary. That's why when they mix together, they become gray. This is what we call a chromatic gray. But here, they're a bit separated. But it's interesting if they're a bit separated and they're not fused together all the time. The green is the green roof, and that's the color. And then this beige-like a mimic. Okay, the colors are not exact to exactly what it looks like, but gives up the impression of what the building looked like, and a few reds, of course, to color the fire trucks red paint. And then the background buildings are just washed out purplish violet type of just gray or just not so detailed. The main focus here was this fire station house. And that's how I did these steps. I shall attempt to very quickly do demonstration of the Aguinaldo Shrine. You're faced with, okay, let me just describe to you that this is different from an actual building when you witness an actual space. Because your perception of a real scene, a building or an environment, is that this is pretty wide. Okay, so the angle of your vision or your perception, okay, it's going to be very big. You have to even need to look around. You have to pan your your face or your eyes to have a look at this entire scene. But in this example, it's pretty much just something that is very small on a screen. I mean, it's easier for you to actually draw it when you're doing something that from a reference. Thing is, it's quite small. It's like it's that small, or a typical image, and then you could just copy it. You're just looking. You're not panning your head. You're not panning your eyes. You're not looking around. But in the actual environment, you have to do it, and then you'll see so many details, and it's overwhelming. That sometimes you don't know what to do. What I do here is the first thing that I want to find out is, in order for me to map out this very humongous object that I see live when I'm there, is finding the square. So finding the square is gives me this sort of a way of determining how to scale it on paper. Okay, so here I'm just going to illustrate a square of somewhere here to that line probably. So this is one way for me to really determine the size that I'm going to do it. So if I draw the same square somehow, well, this is sort of like in perspective. Let's put it like that. And then I count 3 squares. So this is the way somehow I can determine the size. Okay, and then the width of this, I draw another square. But usually what I do here is I take my thumb and my index finger, and I stretch out my arm like that. Okay. Somehow like that. And I usually find where these two are touching on which line or edge of the building is. What, 70 meters, 50 to 70 meters away from the building. If your fingers touch these two, the edge of this, so your thumb, your index finger, for example, and then your thumb is touching like that. So you have those two things touching, and then that's your square. I can start counting these things now. So somehow it's this wide, and then by this wide. So it's about 5 by 3. So I would have one. I'm doing dots instead. Okay. So that's my topmost, and then in the middle, and then here, because there's going to be 5 square wide and 5. Yeah. And that's it. This is where you can now determine. So this is how simple it is. No, I just determine the size that I'm going to be sketching, because that's the one of the most difficult things to determine is usually when you start drawing and then suddenly you find out that it's too big. That's the problem. So now I'm just going to go and silhouette this thing. So here, that's just the general. So I'm starting to draw out just the sketch of where things are. And then the house, then the front. I'm not determining the exact details of everything. I can actually start doing the coloring already. You need to do the most general first, which is what I did. And then you can start doing the details, the tiny details. Okay, so the topmost is usually the lightest area for any building. Okay, so I'm using a very small brush, and I'm placing in water. So the ink isn't so much dry, but that's not stopping me to actually sketch. And I'm just going to use that. Yeah, it's not dry. It's not so entirely waterproof. So I'm wetting the area very well, as much as possible, consistently. So the very first thing that I want to tone down is really from this middle part. I'm placing in some yellow. So this is going to be like a graded wash of sorts. And then I followed by a red. So I'm just going to show you my what I'm doing here with watercolor. I'm going to tone down this thing. Although you don't see red there, right? In the image. But why am I doing? And then it looks like, you're kind of um, overdoing it. Well, I'm not actually. Later on kasi, when it starts drying, watercolor actually um, tones down, or it loses that intensity. When I do grass, I like to mix it with yellow and blue. Make sure that it's wet. Okay, so I'm just gonna. Okay, I'm not gonna color all the sky blue. Gonna put in some yellow, just to note that that's where the sun is. Drop in more water, just to spread that out. Where you need to stop and let it dry for like 10 minutes. The thing about watercolor is that you don't be intimidated with so many colors. If you want to try to make it, and the most important thing is you're trying to describe the shades and shadows, making the object or the place a bit more 3D, contrasting, putting in the shadows, shaping the entire thing. Even the red roof can be the last thing that you'll be doing. So I'm just going to be start to contrast these things now. So what I usually do here is really to mix a puddle of purple, more blue shade than red, more like a violet type of thing. I'm gonna dry. Okay, I'm just gonna show you how I'm managing my brush here. So that determining the amount of water. So and then what about I see the trees behind here, and I could start doing that also. I'm just gonna take some yellow, just placing in some yellows here to contrast that. More yellow there. Blue. Have this sort of like blue, and then try to mix it like that onto the yellow. And then a bit more this intense blue on top, and then let them mix. But don't overdo it. Just let them mix naturally sometimes. Okay, so I'm using the tip of my brush here. Just gonna add some blue there, just to contrast the roofing out, so it pops out. Put in yellow, and then I don't want them mixing so much. And then let's see what other trees are popping. Yes, the front one. Okay, so then now I try to do the shadows. Okay, so shadows or the shading with that mix that I did just now. And if I need more, I'm just gonna make a puddle. I'm gonna place in some of the water. I'm squeezing out from my water brush. Okay, I think the consistency is okay. This is a bit more reddish, so I'm just gonna add a bit more blue, so it's more purplish. Or like the shallow there. So now I'm just shaping the entire building with where the shadows are. coloring the roof. Okay, so the roofing need not be entirely be maroon. And then later on, it becomes lighter. So I'm adding a bit of water to my mix, and then it becomes lighter. So nawala yung ano, halos nawala yung uh, underwash. It's sort of like disappeared. You don't notice it anymore, and then you have this impression of the building being white, right? It didn't happen. I mean, it didn't used to just now, but this is how you do it. How do you determine just an impression of the entire thing? And the only thing left for me to do is really if I spend more time trying to put in a bit more detail. Okay. Question ni Denise. What do you do while the paint is drying? I can do a second paint. I can do a second scene. Now that's what I learned from drawing portraits with the Watercolor Society of Manila. When in the Ayala Museum days, we every other Friday we had a portrait session, and what I usually do is I have two sketch pads with me. So while the first one is drying, I'm doing the second one, and then when the second one is still wet, I go back to the first one. Now you can do something I learned that you don't have to wait for the one painting that you know. Yeah, I like the colors mixing onto paper rather than so much mixing. So it takes less time. The number one thing that you don't see much on demonstration is the management of water with your brush. This rag, really this management of taking off water and then squeezing to have more water, or you take more water from the well and then draining it again, or cleaning out the pigments from either it's a water brush or the regular types of brush. Is one of the less talked about in demonstrations of watercolor that you don't see behind the scenes. You just see them painting, but you don't actually see them managing their brushes so much that they pick up water and then they place it on here, and then suddenly they dry it again, they pick up a pigment and then they mix it, and then they dry it again because they need to clean the brush before picking up another color from another pan. Sketching shouldn't be that long, 5 to 10 minutes. Line drawing, pencil if you're not so keen on ink lines. With that, I could probably end this session. Thank you. So this is goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye.